When something feels off, trust. There's a quiet moment in every relationship when your intuition whispers, something isn't right. He hasn't said anything wrong. He hasn't disappeared. In fact, he might still smile at you, still say, I miss you, still hold your hand in public. But underneath those gestures, something feels off. You try to brush it aside. Maybe you're overthinking. Maybe you're just afraid of getting too close. Or maybe your gut is trying to protect you from a truth your heart isn't ready to face. Carl Jung, one of the greatest minds in psychology, believed that the unconscious never stays hidden for long. No matter how carefully someone masks their true intentions, the truth always leaks out through body language, silence, avoidance, or small inconsistencies. The human mind speaks through symbols, patterns, and behaviors, often long before it ever uses words. So if you're in a relationship and things feel unsteady, don't ignore that feeling, because sometimes the discomfort you're sensing isn't paranoia, it's your inner wisdom speaking. The man you're with might not be openly cruel or cold. In fact, he might seem kind, thoughtful, even attentive in small doses. But the question is he really interested in you, or just in the benefits he gains from being with you? From the beginning of time, the same story has repeated itself. The man who charms makes promises, then vanishes when you need him most. The one who gives just enough affection to keep you chasing, but never enough to make you feel secure. He may not be malicious, but he knows exactly how to keep the dynamic in his favor while you keep hoping things will change. This is emotional manipulation, and it's far more common and far more subtle than most people realize. But here's the good news: once you see the pattern, you can break it. In this story, you'll uncover 8 behaviors that reveal when a man is using you without ever truly committing. Some of these behaviors are painfully obvious. Others are so subtle that you might be overlooking them every day, telling yourself it's not that bad, or maybe I'm just expecting too much. But deep down, you felt it. And the truth is, love should not feel like confusion. So stay with me, because the final behavior, the 8th, is the most dangerous of all. It's the one that makes women stay in relationships where they will never be a priority. It's the one that keeps hope alive even when everything else is falling apart. But before we dive in, remember this: you are not here to earn love. You are here to be loved fully, clearly, and without question. If you're ready to stop settling, let's begin. The illusion of connection. There's a moment in every relationship when you start to feel it, that subtle disconnection that creeps in quietly. You can't quite explain it, and you tell yourself not to overthink. After all, he still texts you back. He still calls you beautiful. He still shows up sometimes. But something feels off. He says the right things, yet his presence feels distant. His actions don't match his words. You find yourself trapped between what you hear and what you feel, torn between staying hopeful and questioning everything. Carl Jung once wrote that the unconscious always finds a way to express itself. That means no matter how charming someone appears, no matter how well they control their outward image, the truth always leaks through a delayed reply, a missing glance, a silence that stretches too long. And sometimes that truth is simple: he's not in love with you. He's in love with the feeling of being loved. He's not here for the connection, he's here for convenience, validation, or control. Now, I know those words sting, but recognizing this pattern is the beginning of reclaiming your emotional freedom. So how do you know if a man is genuinely invested in you, or if he's just using you? Let's dive into the first behavior that reveals the truth. Behavior 1: no real commitment, just temporary presence. In the early days, he seems like the dream. He's attentive, says all the right things, and gives just enough to spark your hope. You feel seen, wanted, maybe even chosen. But as time passes, a strange feeling begins to take root: uncertainty. He doesn't talk about the future, or if he does, it's vague. Let's see where this goes. I'm not ready for anything serious right now, but I really like being with you. You hear the words, but the actions say something else entirely. He disappears for days, becomes cold without warning, then returns with a smile and a hug like nothing happened. According to Jung, this kind of emotional inconsistency is not accidental. It's a psychological loop designed to keep you hooked. Your mind, desperate to find answers, becomes obsessed with decoding his feelings. You replay conversations, analyze texts, question yourself. This isn't love. It's emotional confusion wrapped in false hope. Jung would say that this behavior reflects a deep internal conflict, a divide between what someone presents outwardly and what remains hidden in their subconscious. This man likely fears loneliness, but he also fears commitment. He doesn't want to be alone, but he doesn't want the responsibility of showing up for someone else either. So he keeps you close, but just close enough. He doesn't want to lose you, but he also doesn't want to be with you in the way you truly deserve. This on and off presence is not a sign of confusion. It's a strategy. It creates a craving in your subconscious, a hunger to win him over, to finally get that consistent love you've been waiting for. And this, Jung explains, is the archetype of illusion. You start believing that with just a little more patience, a little more effort, a little more love, he'll change. But he won't. Because here's the painful truth. He's not confused about what he wants. He's just clear that it's not you, not in the way you need. The psychological trap. Jung taught that we all have subconscious beliefs rooted in our earliest experiences. For many women, especially those raised in environments where love had to be earned, there's an unconscious belief that says, if I'm good enough, patient enough, he'll finally see my worth. This belief is a trap because a man who is emotionally unavailable will always stay just out of reach, giving you enough to hope, but never enough to feel secure. He doesn't need to fully disappear to hurt you. All he has to do is remain inconsistent. And you stay. You stay because you remember how sweet he was on your birthday. You stay because of that one weekend that felt like magic. You stay because of the way he holds your hand when you're out in public. But don't confuse moments of affection with real commitment. One good day does not outweigh months of emotional neglect. What Jung would ask you. Carl Jung would not simply tell you to leave. Instead, he'd ask, what part of you is tolerating inconsistency? What do you believe about yourself that makes you settle for uncertainty? Why do you keep investing in someone who never shows up fully? And most importantly, what childhood wound taught you that love must be earned through suffering? Because this isn't just about him, it's about you, about the patterns you've internalized, about the version of love you were taught to accept. The man in front of you may be emotionally unavailable, but your deeper healing begins when you realize you've been unavailable to yourself, abandoning your own needs just to keep someone who doesn't deserve you. The shift you must make. You don't need a man who leaves you guessing. You don't need someone whose love feels like a puzzle. You need someone who shows up consistently, who makes you feel safe, chosen, prioritized. Real love is not confusing. Real love doesn't require you to chase, to prove, or to guess. So if you're in a situation where he says he cares, but never commits, where he keeps you on an invisible leash of hope while doing the bare minimum, it's time to step back. Not to punish him, but to honor yourself. You deserve a love that's clear, a love that feels like home, not a battlefield. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stop hoping he'll change and start choosing your own peace. The illusion of independence. At first, he seems refreshingly low maintenance. He doesn't chase drama. He respects his space. He appears calm, self-sufficient, maybe even emotionally mature. You tell yourself, this is good. He's just independent. He doesn't get overly attached. He's stable. But weeks go by, then months, and you begin to realize something's missing. You know his favorite food, what time he wakes up, the music he listens to in the car. but you don't really know him. You've never heard him talk about his fears, his past, or how he feels about you. Whenever the conversation steers toward anything vulnerable, he deflects or simply goes quiet. And the more you try to connect, the further away he seems. This, Carl Jung would say, is not true independence. It's emotional avoidance masked as freedom. Behind the mask of detachment, in Jungian psychology, we all carry mask roles we play in the world to protect our inner selves. These masks called personas are the faces we show others. The confident one, the strong one, the independent one. But behind the mask lies the real person, the fears, wounds, and emotional truths we try to keep hidden. Men who use the independent man mask often aren't independent at all. In fact, their emotional distance is a defense mechanism. Jung believed that those who refuse vulnerability are usually terrified of what they might uncover within themselves if they let someone get too close. So instead, they keep relationships surface level. They keep you guessing. And every time you show emotion or try to deepen the connection, they pull away, not because they don't care, but because they're not willing to go where love truly lives. The trap you fall into, the hardest part of being with someone emotionally unavailable, is that it doesn't feel extreme, at least not at first. There are no dramatic fights, no screaming matches, just a quiet, aching distance that never fully closes. You start to question yourself, am I asking for too much? Maybe he's just not good at talking about feelings. If I'm patient, maybe he'll open up. But he doesn't, because his wall isn't temporary, it's structural. And here's the most painful twist: the more you care, the more he retreats. It's as if your love threatens his illusion of control. Jung taught that the psyche resists intimacy when it fears losing itself. To a man like this, vulnerability feels like danger, and your emotional availability only magnifies his discomfort. So what does he do? He creates confusion. He labels you as too emotional or needy. He says, I just need space, or you're overthinking things. Suddenly you feel like the problem, but you're not. The problem is that he built a relationship without ever opening the door to real connection. Why You Stay Young believed that we are drawn to people who reflect something unresolved in ourselves. If you stay in a relationship like this, it's not because you're weak, it's because a part of your unconscious is trying to heal. Maybe you learned early on that love had to be earned through patience. Maybe someone once taught you that if you just try hard enough, someone cold will eventually warm up. Maybe deep inside there's a belief that emotional distance means mystery, and mystery feels romantic. But that's not love. Love doesn't feel like silence. It doesn't feel like emotional hide and seek. The question Jung would ask. At this point, Jung would challenge you not to analyze him, but to reflect on yourself. What inside you is attracted to someone who keeps you at a distance? Is it the challenge, the hope that if you break through his wall, you'll finally feel worthy? Or is it the fear that if you walk away, you'll have to face your own loneliness? Because real independence, the kind that builds healthy love, doesn't push people away. It welcomes vulnerability. It says, you're safe with me. Breaking the cycle. The longer you stay in a relationship with someone emotionally unavailable, the more you begin to shrink. You lower your expectations. You start calling their silence peace. You begin to see emotional scraps as proof of affection, but that's not what you deserve. A man who loves you will not hide behind his independence. He will meet you emotionally where you are. He will listen. He will share. He will show up not only physically, but emotionally, vulnerably, fully. So if you're constantly feeling like you're knocking on a door that never opens, ask yourself, why are you standing outside waiting? And what would happen if instead of waiting, you walk towards someone who's already waiting for you, arms open, not walls raised, silent manipulation? The game. You didn't know you were playing. He doesn't yell. He doesn't insult you. He never tells you what you can or cannot do. And that's exactly why you think this must be healthy, but something inside you still feels off. You're constantly overthinking, walking on eggshells, unsure how he'll respond if you say the wrong thing. You don't feel seen, but you can't quite say why. He seems so calm, so easygoing. But when you try to talk about feelings, the mood shifts subtly but noticeably. This is manipulation in its quietest, most dangerous form. According to Carl Jung, the unconscious mind often manipulates not through force, but through absence, through what isn't said, through what is left unresolved, through silences that leave you guessing. How silent manipulation works. He knows exactly how to keep you close without ever giving you what you really need. When you're glowing with happiness, maybe after a promotion, a compliment, or a moment of confidence, he pulls away, just enough to make you question whether you did something wrong. But when you start to feel distant or begin to reclaim your power, he senses it and he comes back. He'll text, he'll call, he might even show up with affection, but it's never complete. It's never consistent. It's never safe. And just when you think things might finally change, he slips away again, leaving you wondering what you did to lose him. This emotional yo-yo is not accidental. It's control disguised as detachment. Jung wrote extensively about psychological projection, how we see in others what we can't face in ourselves. In relationships, this often plays out when someone subtly manipulates you in order to maintain power without ever taking responsibility. They don't need to scream to make you feel small. They just withhold affection. They avoid clarity. They twist your reality until you're not sure if you're overreacting or just waking up. The real damage. This kind of manipulation is hard to spot because it wears a mask of maturity. He doesn't act cruel. He might even tell you how amazing you are. He may call you too sensitive with a gentle laugh or suggest you relax when you express hurt. But each time you speak up and are dismissed, a tiny part of you shrinks. You start questioning your emotions. You try to become easier to love. You suppress your needs so you don't scare him away. And eventually you stop speaking up altogether, not because everything is okay, but because you've been trained to believe that your feelings are too much. What Jung would say. Carl Jung would not look at this dynamic as merely emotional immaturity. He would see it as a reflection of the shadow, the hidden part of a person that holds suppressed fears, control issues, and unacknowledged wounds. The man who manipulates in this way is not just emotionally unavailable, he is emotionally strategic. He offers just enough to keep your hope alive without ever giving you what you truly want: consistency, depth, and real intimacy. Jung believed that when we are caught in this kind of dynamic, we must ask, what part of me has accepted breadcrumbs and mistaken them for love? The cycle of self-doubt. Here's what often happens in relationships like this. You feel a need for clarity, but don't ask for it because you fear pushing him away. You feel unseen, but question if you're just being too needy. You feel manipulated, but doubt yourself because he's not doing anything wrong. This self-doubt is part of the manipulation. The less certain you are of your own feelings, the more power he holds. He doesn't have to control you directly. He just creates the environment where you start controlling yourself. And the longer you stay in that emotional fog, the harder it is to trust your own voice again. You start to change for him. You change how you speak, how you express emotion, what you expect from a relationship. You begin shrinking to fit a version of yourself that he will finally love, and yet somehow it never works. Because he doesn't want to love you fully. He wants to keep you just uncertain enough that you keep trying. What real love looks like. Let's be clear, real love doesn't play games. Real love doesn't reward silence and punish emotion. Real love doesn't disappear when you express your needs. Real love stays. It holds space. It listens. It works through hard conversations. It makes you feel safe, not confused. So if you're constantly wondering whether you're being too much or if your emotions are valid, that's a sign something is wrong. Not with you, but with the environment you're in. The question Jung would ask you, Carl Jung would not tell you to confront him or fix him. Instead, he'd ask, why do you continue to invest in someone who thrives in your confusion? What makes you believe that love must feel unstable to feel real? Where did you learn that emotional withholding is normal? Your power begins with clarity. The moment you recognize this pattern, the push and pull, the vague affection, the avoidance of vulnerability, you begin to take your power back. Because manipulation thrives in confusion, and clarity is your way out. You don't need to become less emotional. You don't need to be easier to love. You only need to stop tolerating behavior that makes you question your worth. You are not hard to love. You've just been loving someone who benefits from making you feel that way. The empty space behind the smile. He's not dramatic. He doesn't start fights. He rarely gets angry. And when you do, he says things like, let's not argue about silly things. Can't we just enjoy the moment? At first, this seems refreshing. After all, who wouldn't want a relationship free from conflict and tension? But then something strange starts to happen. You find yourself doing most of the work, emotionally, mentally, and even physically. You initiate the deep talks, the plans, the reconciliation. You're always the one checking in, making sure the relationship doesn't fall apart. Meanwhile, he floats unbothered, always a little distant, always fine. You begin to realize that beneath the calm exterior is nothing. No effort, no real presence, no emotional reciprocity, just silence and passivity dressed up as peace. The illusion of low maintenance. He might call himself easygoing. He doesn't complain. He doesn't criticize. He doesn't pressure you. But when something hurts you, he minimizes it. When you bring up concerns, he says you're being too intense. When you ask where the relationship is going, he shrugs and says, let's see. And yet you stay because he's not mean. He's not cruel. He's just neutral. That neutrality is exactly what makes this so difficult to walk away from. He doesn't give enough to move forward, but he doesn't pull away enough for you to let go. Carl Jung wrote that we often find ourselves in psychological limbo states where we're neither growing nor healing, simply repeating. These loops are fueled by a lack of clarity and a subconscious fear of rocking the boat. And that's what this man creates emotional limbo. The hidden strategy. Though he may appear passive, this is not a man without strategy. He gives you just enough to keep your hope alive. A thoughtful message here, a sweet moment there, and then pulls back into his shell. Jung would call this a shadow projection, a man who avoids inner vulnerability and instead unconsciously keeps relationships shallow to avoid confronting his own emotional wounds. He doesn't intend to hurt you, but he doesn't intend to love you deeply either. He simply intends to stay comfortable, and you unknowingly make that possible. Why you stay? You tell yourself he's just not expressive, that maybe he loves differently, that some people don't show feelings the same way. You start lowering your expectations, not because you want to, but because it's the only way to stay in the relationship without feeling constantly disappointed. This is a dangerous turning point. Jung emphasized that what we tolerate in others often reflects what we believe about ourselves deep down. If you're always giving and rarely receiving, it may be time to ask, what part of me believes this is all I'm worthy of? The quiet cost of doing it all. There is nothing more exhausting than being the emotional anchor in a relationship that only floats when you carry it. When you're the one always asking the hard questions, creating the space for intimacy, making sure things are okay, you stop being a partner and become a caregiver. This dynamic slowly erodes your sense of balance and eventually your sense of self. You start thinking that being strong means accepting less than what you need. You start feeling guilty for wanting more. You begin to question if maybe love is supposed to feel one-sided. But it's not. Real love is not about carrying the entire relationship on your back. It's about reciprocity, presence, consistency. What Jung would ask you, Jung would not ask you to fix him. He would ask you to confront yourself. Why do you continue to invest in someone who never meets you halfway? What do you fear you'll lose if you stop giving so much? Sometimes the truth is painful. We stay with emotionally unavailable people because we've mistaken emotional labor for love, because we were raised to think that being good means being selfless, even when it hurts. But self-sacrifice is not love. Freedom starts with recognition. It's not about making him talk more or beg for affection or change who he is. It's about asking yourself, are you constantly initiating while he only reacts? Do you feel more alone when you're with him than when you're by yourself? Are you building a life together, or are you just holding things together? Because if you're constantly holding the emotional thread that ties you two together, maybe it's time to ask, what happens if I let go? Would he reach for the thread or just watch it fall? Real love feels different. You don't have to fight to be seen. You don't have to explain why your needs matter. You don't have to dim your emotions to make someone comfortable. The right person will not let you carry the relationship alone. He will meet you in the middle. He will feel like a teammate, not a task. So if you're exhausted, if you feel like you're always the one keeping things afloat, that's not love. That's survival. When jokes aren't funny, the subtle art of belittling. At first it seems harmless. He teases you about your outfit. He makes a joke about how long it takes you to get ready. He laughs at the way you mispronounce something, then adds relax. I'm only joking, and maybe you do. You laugh it off, smile through the sting, and convince yourself you're being too sensitive. But over time, the jokes start to hurt. He calls you dramatic when you show emotion. He compares you to other women playfully, of course. He pokes at your dreams, downplays your achievements, and says things like, you should smile more. You used to be more fun. Are you really wearing that each time you feel smaller, less worthy, less sure of yourself? And yet, he's smiling, laughing, acting like it's all in good fun. This is not humor. This is control. When humor becomes a weapon, Carl Jung taught that we often use indirect methods to express hidden aspects of the self, especially those we're too ashamed to admit consciously. Sarcasm for many becomes a shield, a way to express resentment, jealousy, or fear without owning it. So when he jokes about your weight, your goals, your feelings, what he's really doing is projecting his own insecurities outward while framing them as harmless fun. And if you call him out, he flips the script. You're too sensitive. You can't take a joke. Don't be so serious. Suddenly the conversation is no longer about what he said, it's about how you reacted. And that's the trap. Why it works so well. This kind of manipulation is incredibly effective because it confuses you. You think he didn't mean it, he's just kidding. I don't want to overreact. But deep down you start editing yourself. You second guess your outfit. You keep quiet about your achievements. You laugh when you feel like crying, just to keep the peace. Jung believed that these emotional microaggressions, when left unchallenged, accumulate in the unconscious mind, slowly shaping how we view ourselves and our worth. And eventually you begin to internalize the message. Maybe I'm not good enough. Maybe I am too much. Maybe I do need to change. But none of those things are true. The hidden purpose of belittling. This behavior isn't about humor. It's about power. By chipping away at your confidence one joke at a time, he ensures you stay unsure of yourself. And when you're unsure of yourself, you're easier to control. He doesn't have to tell you to be quiet because eventually you silence yourself. He doesn't need to say you're not good enough because over time you start believing it. This is how emotional manipulation thrives, not through cruelty, but through small daily cuts that leave no visible scars. What Jung would ask. Jung would look at this pattern not just as a relationship issue, but as an invitation to explore your inner landscape. He would ask, what inside of you allows another person to define your worth? Where did you learn that love can hurt and still be love? Why do you laugh when something inside you wants to cry? Because the real question is not whether he meant the joke, but why you felt the need to accept it. The dangerous link between love and criticism. Many women were raised in environments where love and criticism were intertwined, where affection came with conditions, where teasing was a form of attention, where tough love meant never feeling truly safe. So now when a man makes jokes at your expense, part of you recognizes it and calls it love. But it's not. Real love doesn't come wrapped in sarcasm. Real love uplifts. It doesn't leave you confused. It doesn't make you question your value. It doesn't laugh when you're in pain. How to recognize the pattern. If you're not sure whether the teasing has crossed the line, ask yourself, do his jokes make you feel insecure? Have you changed how you act to avoid being teased? Do you feel like you can't express when something hurts without being called dramatic? If you answered yes to any of these, you're not in a relationship with someone who respects you. You're in a relationship with someone who uses humor to keep control and silence your truth. The path to self-respect. You don't need to become tougher. You don't need to laugh off pain to keep someone's affection. You need to reclaim your voice and remember that discomfort is not the price of connection. Jung believed that the path to wholeness begins when we stop abandoning ourselves to please others. So the next time he makes a joke at your expense, ask yourself, is this the kind of love I want to model for my future? Is this the energy I want to absorb for the rest of my life? Because you deserve more than love that makes you shrink. You deserve love that helps you grow. The invisible wall. When distance is a tactic, not a flaw, he's not completely absent. He's not completely present either. He's just halfway there. There are moments when you feel close. He opens up a little. He lets you in just enough to make you believe there's something real between you. But then right when you start to feel safe, he changes. He pulls back. He grows quiet. He becomes vague or cold. And you're left confused thinking, did I do something wrong? But the truth is, this isn't about something you did. This is about control, a wall that feels personal. You tell yourself he just needs time, that maybe he's been hurt before, that with enough patience and understanding, you'll earn his trust. But weeks go by, then months, and still you feel like you're standing outside a door that never fully opens. This is not temporary withdrawal. This is a pattern, and it's not rooted in fear, it's rooted in power. Carl Jung believed that people construct defenses not only to protect their wounds, but sometimes to manipulate their relationships. Emotional walls can serve as barriers, or they can become tools. And in this case, he's using distance as a way to keep you chasing. How this strategy works. He shares just enough to keep hope alive. Maybe a story from his past. Maybe a vulnerable moment. Maybe he tells you you're special or that he doesn't open up to just anyone. But it always stops there. He never lets you all the way in. He never tells you how he really feels about the relationship. He never defines it, even if it's been months. He simply lets you wonder. And your subconscious condition to fill emotional gaps starts working overtime. He just needs time. If I show I care, maybe he'll open up. He's different with me. I can feel it. But here's the cruel twist. Your effort isn't inspiring change. It's maintaining the cycle. The more you try to connect, the more he pulls away, then reappears offering just enough attention to reignite your hope. Why you feel so hooked, Jung explained that the human mind tends to chase what it cannot fully grasp. When something is consistently out of reach, it triggers a primal longing, a desire to win, to heal, to prove. This is the archetype of the unattainable. You begin to associate his distance with mystery, his coldness with depth, his silence with substance. But it's not mystery, it's manipulation. He's not deep. He's just emotionally unavailable and using that to keep you emotionally invested. The psychological damage. This dynamic is quietly brutal. You start feeling like you're too needy for wanting clarity. You begin to see emotional crumbs as nourishing. You keep trying harder even when your energy is running out. But love is not supposed to feel like emotional hunger. A relationship should never make you feel like you're always one conversation away from being loved fully. If you're constantly trying to earn closeness, then you're not in a partnership, you're in an emotional loop. What Jung would ask you, Jung would not ask you to knock louder on his emotional wall. He would ask what inside you believes you have to chase someone who is clearly avoiding you. What unhealed part of your past has convinced you that love must feel uncertain? Are you loving him or loving the idea of being the one to finally fix him? And perhaps most importantly, what would happen if you stopped chasing him and started listening to yourself? Because sometimes the answer isn't found in fighting for love, it's found in recognizing when love is not fighting for you. The dangerous reward loop. Here's the worst part of this dynamic. Every once in a while, he will give you what you've been craving: a beautiful date, a sincere message, a moment of closeness that feels like a breakthrough. And that's what keeps you hooked. You think, yes, this is the real him. He's finally opening up. But soon after, the wall returns. The silence, the coldness, the distance, and the cycle begins again. You're not in a relationship with him. You're in a relationship with his potential. Rewriting the story. You are not difficult. You are not too much. You are not asking for anything unreasonable. You're simply asking for presence, for emotional honesty, for someone to show up and mean it. That's not too much, that's the bare minimum. So if you feel like you're climbing an invisible wall every day just to stay connected, ask yourself, is this really love or is this just the absence of rejection? Because the longer you accept emotional walls, the more you'll convince yourself that love must feel hard. But it doesn't have to. What real connection looks like. The right man won't use silence as punishment. He won't make you chase clarity. He won't keep you in a constant state of questioning your worth. He'll show up. He'll be clear. He'll make space, not walls. So if you find yourself aching behind his emotional distance, it may be time to stop climbing and start walking in the direction of someone who doesn't make you beg to be let in. Emotional whiplash, the highs that hook you and the lows that break you. One day he's affectionate, attentive, and talking about the future. The next he's cold, distant, and emotionally checked out. One moment he texts you sweet things out of nowhere. The next he leaves you on read for hours, maybe days. You try to stay calm. You tell yourself not to overthink. You remind yourself that no one is perfect and that maybe you just need to be patient. But deep inside, you feel like you're on an emotional roller coaster and the ride is making you sick. This is emotional whiplash. And it's not random, it's calculated. The pattern of highs and lows. It starts with a high, he opens up. He gives you attention. He compliments you. Maybe you spend a magical day together, or he suddenly talks about how much you mean to him. And just when your heart starts to trust, he pulls away. Maybe he ignores your call. Maybe he cancels plans. Maybe he becomes sarcastic, impatient, or withdrawn. You're confused, hurt, anxious. And then when you're just about to walk away, he returns. A kind message, a spontaneous gift, a romantic gesture. The high returns and with it your hope. This is not romance. This is addiction. Why You Stay. Carl Jung believed that human beings are wired to seek wholeness and that the psyche tries to resolve inner wounds by seeking their opposites in others. So when a person gives you love one moment, in emotional starvation the next, it triggers something deep inside you, a desire to restore balance. You want to fix what went wrong. You want to go back to the high. And that's what makes this pattern so powerful. You associate love with the effort of winning it back. You think if I just do better, he'll be that sweet version again. If I'm patient, he'll open up like he did before. But the truth is that version of him only exists to keep you emotionally tethered. It's not real consistency, it's emotional bait. This is not confusion. It's control. Many women assume this behavior means a man is confused or emotionally damaged, but often he knows exactly what he's doing. He doesn't want to lose you, but he doesn't want to fully commit either. He wants the freedom of emotional detachment and the comfort of knowing you'll still be there. So he gives just enough to keep you hoping, but never enough to make you feel secure. This isn't confusion, it's self-interest. It's manipulation dressed as indecision. The psychological toll. Here's what this does to you over time. You stop trusting your instincts. You become emotionally dependent on his approval. You begin blaming yourself when things go cold. You shrink your needs and suppress your feelings, hoping to not scare him away. Carl Jung described this as the conflict of duality, when our conscious mind tells us one thing, but our unconscious keeps pulling us into harmful patterns. You know this dynamic is unhealthy, but your inner child, the part of you that learned love, must be earned, keeps hoping, hoping that if you try hard enough, he'll finally stay. You're not crazy, you're conditioned. One of the most damaging parts of emotional inconsistency is the self-blame. You start thinking, maybe I'm overreacting. Maybe I'm too needy. Maybe I just need to give him space. But you're not needy. You're just responding to a relationship that's emotionally unsafe. Your nervous system is constantly being activated, kept in a state of anxiety, anticipation, and hope. This isn't love. This is trauma bonding. And the worst part, you begin to believe that this is what love is supposed to feel like. But it's not. What Jung would ask. Jung would look at this pattern and gently ask, where did you learn that love must be chased? What part of you is addicted to the idea of fixing someone emotionally unavailable? What wounds are you trying to heal by staying in a dynamic that only breaks you? Because here's the truth. Real love doesn't make you feel like you're walking on a tightrope. It doesn't vanish and reappear like a magic trick. It doesn't test your patience over and over again just to see if you'll stay. Healing begins with recognition. If you're in a relationship where one day feels like a dream and the next like a nightmare, ask yourself, are you staying for who he is or who he sometimes pretends to be? Are you in love or are you hooked on potential? Because if you have to guess whether he cares, he doesn't. If you have to fight for his attention, it's not freely given. And if you have to wait for love to return, it was never stable to begin with. What real love feels like. Love is not a guessing game. Love doesn't leave you dizzy and disoriented. Love doesn't feel like gambling with your self-worth. Love is clear. Love is present. Love is consistent. And yes, it can still be passionate, exciting, and full of mystery without being emotionally destructive. So if you're stuck in the loop of emotional highs and lows, step back, because you weren't meant to survive your relationships. You were meant to thrive in them, freedom or selfishness. When space becomes a cover for avoidance. He says he needs space. He talks about freedom. He tells you that relationships shouldn't feel like cages, and we shouldn't control each other. And maybe at first you agree. After all, no one wants to feel suffocated in a relationship. You respect his independence. You don't want to seem possessive or clingy, but slowly the word freedom becomes one-sided. He disappears when it's convenient for him. He makes decisions without considering you. He lives his life as if your presence is optional, something nice to have, but never something he actively shows up for. And when you voice your needs, he says you're being too controlling, too emotional, too much. You're left walking a tightrope between being understanding and completely abandoning your own needs. But this isn't freedom. This is emotional selfishness. The one-way street of autonomy. He gets to do whatever he wants whenever he wants. But when you start needing time for yourself, suddenly he becomes suspicious. When you stop texting back right away, he notices. When you set a boundary, he calls it drama. His version of freedom is not mutual, it's strategic. And slowly you begin to adapt. You stop asking for clarity. You try to be chill. You wait for him to show up instead of demanding what you deserve. Because if you don't adjust, you fear he'll leave. So you start betraying yourself just to keep him. Carl Jung and the ego's tricks. Carl Jung believed that the ego is not just our sense of self, it's our storyteller. It crafts narratives to justify our behaviors, especially when they benefit us. This man's ego has built a story around his need for freedom. But that story is a mask. What he calls freedom is in fact avoidance. What he calls independence is in fact emotional negligence. He's not protecting his space, he's protecting himself from accountability. He's not preserving love, he's preserving convenience. And in doing so, he keeps you in a position where you're always giving, always adjusting, always sacrificing, while he does nothing. The emotional impact on you. You begin to feel like a guest in your own relationship, always hoping you're not asking too much, always calculating how to bring something up without making him feel trapped. You suppress your emotions. You make peace with crumbs. You live on hope and hollow promises. And over time, your self-worth starts to erode because love shouldn't feel like negotiating against yourself. Jung said that what we continue to tolerate reflects what we believe we deserve. So the question is no longer about him, it's about you. What Jung would ask in a relationship like this, Jung would gently turn the mirror back toward you and ask, why do you continue to give more than you receive? What part of you believes your needs are a threat to love? When did you learn that love must come second to someone else's comfort? Because sometimes it's not the man we need to walk away from. It's the old belief that we must shrink ourselves to be loved. Freedom and healthy love. Let's be clear, healthy relationships do respect space. But space doesn't mean silence. It doesn't mean withdrawal. It doesn't mean disappearing without explanation. True freedom in love is mutual. It says, I can be me and you can be you, and we still choose each other daily. But in this relationship, you're not being chosen. You're being used for comfort, for emotional labor, for the security of having someone there while he keeps you just far enough to never be truly responsible. The final wake-up call. If you feel like you're always adjusting while he stays the same, your needs are always the problem. You're walking on emotional eggshells just to avoid being too much. Then ask yourself the question Jung would pose. Is this really freedom? Or just a form of control where he never has to give more than the bare minimum? You deserve a relationship where your presence isn't treated like a background option, where your voice is heard, where your needs are respected, where your love is returned with clarity and commitment. Because love is not about being less so someone else can feel more free. Love is about meeting each other fully and choosing each other openly. Final reflections. From pattern to power. Throughout this journey, we've explored 8 behaviors that reveal when a man is using you, not because he's incapable of love, but because he's unwilling to give it the way you deserve. These behaviors: lack of commitment, emotional detachment, silent manipulation, passivity, belittling emotional walls, inconsistency, and selfish freedom, are not random. They follow a pattern, and that pattern only continues when we don't recognize it, or worse, when we blame ourselves for it. But now you know better. And when you know better, you choose better. Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. This is your moment to stop calling dysfunction love, to stop mistaking pain for passion, to stop chasing someone who doesn't want to be caught. You are not too much. You are not hard to love. You are not the problem. You are simply learning to value yourself more than the comfort of being chosen by the wrong person. And that is your power. If this journey helped you see yourself more clearly, don't forget to share it. Someone else out there needs this clarity too.